Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, I apologize. It's been a little while since I've been with you. Part of that is that I've been dealing with a little bit of an illness, but also I dragged myself off the couch long enough to record a video the other day and then went to edit it afterwards and found out that there was something wrong with the way the mic recorded, and so it was completely unusable. So unfortunately that has meant it's taken a little while, but we're back. And with that in mind, we're actually going to be doing like a two-part little mini series that go together. Even though they're from completely different channels, they are covering two parts of a similar topic. So today we're going to take a look at a video from History Abridged with Jack Rackham. It's called America Before George Washington Was Weird. And then our next video is going to be the one that I actually recorded the other day, which covers the presidency of George Washington. I'm going to go back and redo it. So it will be one of those instances where it's a video I've watched before because I reacted to it once and recorded it and it didn't work. So I'll explain that when we get there, though. So as always, the link is in the description so you can check out the original content without my commentary, as well as all the other videos that he has to offer. Let's dive into America Before George Washington Was Weird. Oh, and as we dive into this, new shirt on the merch store, introverted but willing to talk about history. I just did up a little design there and added that to the store, so you can check that out. It should be showing up in all the links underneath the videos. And you can play with the colors and stuff. Just because you see it in one color doesn't mean it has to be that color. So, all right.
It took a whole year to make, but my feature-length Rome video is now available on Patreon.
Nice.
Details at the end.
The American Revolution, as I remember it from school, went something like, Studly stud, George Washington wins the war. Everyone wants him to be king, but he wants to be a president instead. And blessed be our founding fathers, write the holy constitution, and the republic is born.
No, he didn't want to be president. He wanted to be home on his property, living out retirement after the war was over. It took a lot out of him. You remember, he was my age during the Revolution. He's in his late 40s. So, you know, he's in his 50s and 60s after the war's over, and he just really wants to go home.
But that story's missing something. The war was over in 1783, and Washington didn't become president until 1789. What happened in between is one of the messiest, craziest times in American history.
And really, 1781 is, October 1781, you have Yorktown, and most people think of that as the end of the war. It wasn't. They were still fighting in 1782. 1783 is when you have everything kind of finalized. The British don't evacuate New York City until very late in 1783.
Half the time there's no government, the other half Congress is moving from town to town dodging rebellions.
Yeah.
America seceded from itself and some of its states were independent countries. Before the Revolution, the American colonies all behaved like independent countries, and honestly they hated each other's guts. Some of them even went to war with each other. When they break away from Britain, they need a national government to organize the war, and in that aspect they succeeded. And Spain has to give us Florida. I fought on your side, jerkwad. Whether or not the...
That's true. It's important to point out, too, that, early on, the Revolution breaks out in New England, and many of the, southern colonies viewed it as a New England problem. But eventually they come around, and it was really important to men like John Adams, Ben Franklin, the Lees from Virginia, that this be unanimous, that there be no dissenting votes when they voted for independence. I think John Adams says it in the John Adams TV show. I don't know if he said it in real life, but he said all 13 clocks need to strike at the same second. So that was really important to have that unity. But as is often the case in history, when you have a common opponent, you can unite. But as soon as that common opponent is withdrawn from the equation, like the end of the war, now you start focusing on your differences rather than what you had in common.
Government could actually govern was almost an afterthought. Here's how it worked. If 9 of the 13 colonies agree, then Congress can pass laws, but not enforce them. There was even a president. 16 of them, actually, before Washington. His official job was to be Congress's babysitter, but his real job was to beg the states for money.
Everybody viewed this as, it was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was meant to be a weak central government, basically a loose collection of what most of these states viewed as independent states that could kind of do their own thing. And even after the Constitution is passed, many of the states, especially in the South, are going to continue to wish that that's the way the government operated, and that's going to be part of what builds up to the American Civil War.
The states all said, "Who wants Congress to pay for the army? Who wants to pay taxes to Congress? Who wants to pay taxes to..." So Congress didn't have any money.
Remember, the war, at least the stated cause of the war, was taxation without representation, and this idea that these taxes were intolerable when placed on the colonies. And so there's a natural aversion to taxes among the people. That's why tariffs become kind of the primary means of revenue.
They tried printing money during the war, but without anything to back it up.
Whoa. Okay, time out. Geeking out ancestry moment right here. If you look right here, you'll see the signature Snowden. So, my last name's Mowry, but it should technically be Snowden. My father is a Snowden, so Snowden is my male line. And my 7th great-grandfather on the male line, that's his signature. That's my direct great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather on the male line. He was a signer of continental currency. I have one of those downstairs in my collection. Very cool to see that this is a Snowden signature on that one.
They crashed the value of the dollar to the point that it wasn't usable anymore. Instead, a local millionaire named Robert Morris began printing his own money.
Yep.
And America paid for everything in Morris bucks for a couple of years. Congress, though, still broke. And they are...
And Robert Morris is actually the guy who George Washington initially wanted to be the Secretary of the Treasury when he became president. Alexander Hamilton was like the backup choice.
Years behind on paying their soldiers. Congress was nearly overrun during the Revolution, and it wasn't by the British, it was by Americans. A group of unpaid soldiers laid siege to the Capitol and locked the congressmen inside. Alexander Hamilton went to appease the people, saying, "Gentlemen, you have my word that in good time..." Pennsylvania, we're broke, you gotta get rid of these guys. We definitely could probably... Take whatever you can and run! They grabbed their papers and scurried off to Princeton. If the war had gone on any longer, who knows, maybe the US would have lost to itself. Now, ending the war...
Yeah, I mean, by 1781, both sides are really in their last chance to win this thing. I mean, the British, it's not that they didn't have resources, but patience in Parliament and among the people was running out for the money and the lives that were being spent trying to keep the American colonies in the British Empire. For the Americans, yeah, it's a real problem not being able to pay the troops, and so they're making a lot of promises they're just not going to be able to keep if something doesn't happen.
Was supposed to be the one thing Congress could do. But the president was sitting with a treaty from Britain acknowledging their independence in his hands and still struggled to get the votes to accept it. Not because there were people voting no, but because Congress was such a dead-end job, nobody showed up to work. After Congress finally approved the treaty, there were 6 months where not even the president showed up to work. But the men who risked their lives to fight for America still wanted to be paid. What are you asking me for? I'm not even in Congress. They elected you president 6 months ago. Oh, right. I think I got a letter about that. And you didn't even think to go to the Capitol? I don't reply to junk mail. Congress elects a new president and comes up with a big brain scheme to get around the tax problem. A bunch of states owe money to Congress for the war, but they are not paying. So Congress forgives the debt in exchange for all of their land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Then Congress could sell the land to settlers for money and use that money to pay the army.
Yeah, so all of the original colonies claimed all the land to the west of them, and we've talked in the past about the fact that that land west of the Appalachian Mountains is available now that the British treaty that ceded that land to the Native Americans is no longer in force. And so Pennsylvania is claiming all the land west of Pennsylvania, and Connecticut claims what is now Northeast Ohio. That's why this area to this day is called the Western Reserve, because it was the Connecticut Western Reserve. Even after all of this land was sold and given back to Congress, Connecticut reserved that one piece. And that's why it's called that. So yeah, I mean, Virginia claims what is Kentucky. Tennessee is that land is claimed by North Carolina, and so on and so forth.
A few states were reluctant to make the deal. Connecticut, in particular, was a big problem. Connecticut, this tiny little guy in New England, had big dreams of stretching from...
Right, so that's why if you look west of Connecticut, if you follow the line, this area where I live is the Western Reserve.
Coast to coast. They even went to war with Pennsylvania 3 times for this land. The treaty with Britain wasn't even a year old, and America already had a mini civil war. But in the end, Congress got the land. And it was worthless because nobody wanted to live on it. Britain never left parts of it. Spain won't let anyone touch the Mississippi River, and both empires are arming the Native American tribes to fight the Americans, and Congress can't fight back because it can't afford to pay the army. The veterans are getting real mad now, but maybe there's a way to pay them back without giving Congress too much power over the states. Massachusetts is a state that was actively trying to raise the money to pay back their debts from the war, which would ultimately get the veterans paid. That took the form of raising taxes on farmers and veterans, who launched a rebellion and tried to overthrow the government. Massachusetts went to Congress for help. Congress said, "You have fun with that." And
yeah, this is the problem with your nation being formed in a rebellion against what you see as oppressive taxes, is that then that same nation isn't going to like it when you impose taxes of your own.
Massachusetts was only able to put down the revolt by starting a GoFundMe. They took donations from merchants and got some general to come out of retirement with a private army. So there's a lot of people who need a stronger government. Expansionists need help moving west, soldiers need to get paid, the states need someone to put down rebellions, and the merchants need real monetary policy, not Morris bucks. Even the guys who invented the government were getting sick of it.
Yeah.
John Adams, big player during the Revolution, now he's an ambassador to the UK, he wants to threaten London with tariffs, and Congress is like, actually, we really can't do that. Then
fascinating moment in American and world history is when John Adams, as a representative of the brand new United States of America, which wrote a Declaration of Independence in which it was denouncing the tyrant George III, John Adams then becomes the ambassador to George III. And stands before him, and it's an extraordinary scene, and a kind of a truncated version of it is portrayed in the miniseries John Adams. It's really well done. Absolutely highly recommend that show if you haven't seen it. And everything that you see him and George III say to each other is accurate. It's just there was more to it than what they show. And we know that because John Adams wrote it all down after it happened, this extraordinary meeting that he has with George III. So the U.S. is trying to establish itself among nations, but it can't even control what's happening amongst itself.
What can you do? To come up with a solution, the states start making deals with each other, which turn into multi-state conferences, which turn into delegations representing almost every state, and hey, wait a minute, this is a Congress, isn't it? And you know, this new Congress should have some new rules, and there should be somebody to enforce those rules, and like a court system for when the rules are confusing. So the delegates lock themselves in a room and chug Red Bull for 4 months, and they come out with a new constitution.
So, interesting thing about the Constitutional Convention, because you had an aversion to the idea of a stronger central government, especially among the Virginians, which are the most powerful state, they couldn't sell it as being a constitutional convention. A lot of the people who came to that convention came thinking that it was really just a meeting to revise the Articles of Confederation. They didn't know they were coming to create an entirely new document. But that's what ended up happening. And in the process, though, there's a lot of compromising that has to happen.
There were a lot of compromises that led to a lot of silly-looking things.
That's one of those rare times when almost the exact words that come out of my mouth immediately come out of his mouth, and that was not intentional.
Now there's got to be 2 Congresses, one where the states are equal and one where the voters are equal. And then somebody chimes in and says, the South should get more representation. Did you get more voters? No, but we've got more people. You enslaved them. Yeah.
One of the most fascinating parts of all this to me, and just crazy to me, but I get that this was all part of a compromise, was that the South wanted to simultaneously say they're property, not people, but we want 3/5 of those properties to be counted as people for the sake of representation. They intentionally asked to be overrepresented in the government, and that it was ever agreed to shows how delicate this whole situation was, that states like Pennsylvania and Connecticut and New York signed off on that kind of an agreement in order to keep everybody together.
Because he said they weren't people. They're not completely people? What, they're half people? 3/4? 3/5?
3/5.
Done deal. But compared to the mess that was America's first 11 years, they clearly gave it a lot of effort. The next step was to convince Congress to replace itself with a completely new government.
Yep.
And what do you say, Mr. President? Huh? What are we gonna do about it? Now they had to get the
Alexander Hamilton, you see him there. He very famously gets up and speaks for 6 hours at the Constitutional Convention. Not an hour here and an hour there, for 6 hours straight. And he was kind of considered a minor player in this Constitutional Convention. He's there as one of the New York delegation, but he's not really that influential compared to how he feels in his mind he is. He's young. He was on the staff of George Washington and spent some time as a New York assemblyman, but really, other than that, hadn't been a player on the national stage.
States on board. Some of them were on board from the start, but a few were more reluctant. What if the first thing we do after we pass the Constitution is change it again? Done deal. Once 9 states were on.
So, in order to get the 9 states they needed in order to ratify it, a lot of selling had to be done. And so that's where you get the Federalist Papers. You get John Jay and James Madison and primarily Alexander Hamilton writing the Federalist Papers under pseudonyms, which is what people often did at that time. They would use Roman names like Publius to write. And they're writing these to convince the public, but also to convince the state delegations to come on board with this by explaining the Constitution. And these papers end up really important because these essays become one of the primary means through which our Supreme Court to this day interprets the Constitution, is to look at those documents. And there are stories about Alexander Hamilton writing so furiously that he has the guy standing at the door waiting to take it to be published, and he's still finishing up the writing and then handing it to him so they can get it out. And they put out these 85 essays in a period of 6 months. It's crazy.
On board, they effectively seceded to go make their own country, meaning states like New York, who were still weighing how much they actually liked this new constitution, suddenly found themselves kicked out of America. New York didn't want to end up like Vermont, who had fought in the Revolutionary War and then got blocked from joining the U.S. because of border disputes.
Well, yeah, because states like New York claimed Vermont as part of its territory. So Vermont's not one of the 13 colonies.
And they really didn't want to get tariffed by America 2.0, so they went along with the deal. North Carolina held out until after George Washington had been elected president and the Constitution had been amended, and then there was Rhode Island. Rhode Island was riding solo until the rest of America threatened to sanction their entire economy, and they finally capitulated in 1790. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And if you like history, I just finished my biggest...
All right, so I'll definitely have to check that out too. But fascinating stuff. There's a lot more to it, of course, and I did a whole series looking at extra history and the Articles of Confederation, where we go into a lot more detail about all of these events we just talked about. So I'll put a link up on the screen here in just a second at the end, where you can click on episode 1 of our look at the Articles of Confederation, and then here in a couple of days we're going to take a look at the Washington presidency and what all went on during those first 8 years under the Constitution. Let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below. Thanks for watching.